And so a lot of people have just leaned into that without really realizing what they're sacrificing.
I'm Kevin Loek. This is not a name. I'm the CEO of a company called Wizard Sardine. We're a Bitcoin security company.
Yeah, I'm Cooks. That is my name, but I'm also Andrew. I work on BTC Pay Server, an open source Bitcoin payment processor.
I'm Set for Privacy is a NIM. Half a NIM maybe. It's up to you to decide. But I am VP of Operations at Cake Wallet, where we focus on bringing privacy to Bitcoin and Monero primarily.
Why should people be concerned about privacy when utilizing Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think like when I approach the topic of why privacy is important, a lot of times I think people can get hung up on privacy as being like the thing you're trying to achieve, but privacy is really just the means to an end. I think privacy is one of the two pillars of making Bitcoin freedom money. You need self-custody. That's, I think, one of the pillars that's absolutely vital. And then you need privacy, because without privacy, even though you may hold your own keys, you may be limited in how you can actually use those. You reveal a lot of information to the people that you send money to or receive money from in some instances. And so when I talk about privacy, I think the easiest way to get it across is that ultimately, if you're able to achieve at least like reasonably good privacy with Bitcoin, it enables you to do so much more with it than you could do otherwise. So that's kind of the main approach that I take to it.
Yeah, I think it's also a natural progression in the work I do. When you start off with payments, the main focus has always been like making sure your keys are your own and nobody has access to them. So self-custody, as you said. And then the natural progression to that is adding privacy to it. It's quite important because if everyone knows your funds, then somebody's going to try and get your keys eventually. And it's the very basics, the basic approach to why you want privacy. Just protection of your funds and yourself ultimately. You've got more, you can expand on that quite a bit, but that's the very basic approach to why you would want privacy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of them. I'm going to add something a little bit different. So Bitcoin is transparency. And I think this is something people are not, like the average person, the new user, is not necessarily aware of that because like the media and whatever communication that has been around Bitcoin was completely wrong around like, oh, this is used by criminals and all the Bitcoiners, you know, they hide their stuff and they don't pay taxes and whatever. Bitcoin, the way it works is extremely transparent, and so privacy is actually hard to achieve, very hard to achieve. And it's more like a very long journey, as you were saying. It's not really a goal as such, and I don't even think you can achieve it properly. It's always like a battle, but it's still necessary to make it work. And also the fact that the system is designed in a transparent way, you kind of have to fight it in a different way for your own privacy. So that could be your privacy as like using a name or not doing podcasts, not doing conferences, not showing up at conferences, not talking about Bitcoin on Twitter. So everything we basically do wrong. So at least your funds are not connected to you or people around you don't know you are a Bitcoiner. And that's a really good start. And then, of course, you have the tools to actually try to unlink these coins that may be linked to you and kind of disconnect them afterwards, after the fact. So yeah, I think this is important in the discussion as well.
Mm-hmm. Where does the NIM culture come from and why do you guys use one?
Well, I mean, growing up on the internet in the 2000s was just the way to do it. Like everyone just hung out on forum boards. You just create a random name, you join, you hang out with people. Nobody asked for your name. Nobody wanted to know your name. You just wanted a funny name to hang out. People could recognize you based on your title there. And that's how everything was. You go on a different forum board, you may reuse it. Most likely you actually create a new one. Play a game, you create a different name. That's just how we grew up. It wasn't like this crazy conscious 12-year-old attitude to become a cypherpunk or anything. I just wanted to play games, hang out with people, be on the internet, and that was the natural way of things. Nowadays, that's almost completely gone. Like everyone wants to basically have their full name with their basic birthday and location and everything in every single platform linked to the same identity. and it's just a different mindset, different lifestyle.
Yeah, I think like I came at it from a very similar angle when that growing up, like you used an M. Like that was
Yeah.
just normal. Like yes, with your in real life friends you used your real name, but if you're doing anything online you used an M. So like that concept is very familiar. But honestly, I did it long before I cared about privacy at all. It wasn't because I didn't want someone to know my real name. It was just that was the way you did things back then. And like Hooks mentioned, I feel like that's shifted massively, really due to social media and people being incentivized by malicious social media companies to just constantly pour out their own personal information into these platforms to try to get the dopamine hit of a like or a retweet or whatever. And so a lot of people have just leaned into that without really realizing what they're sacrificing. And when I approached like how I wanted to set myself up in this space, I initially started with like a hardcore NIM that I didn't reveal my face. I was very much more careful about it. But I realized that I wanted to kind of strike a balance because there's something really valuable about a face that people recognize and are familiar with and that they can actually see on a podcast like this rather than someone who's always masked or doesn't do video at all. You have a lot of disadvantages. That's not to say someone shouldn't do that. I think that should be most people's approach is they don't just reveal their face everywhere and use their real name. But I think that there's a useful balance of I'm not going to reveal all of my personal information, but I can set up a NIM that then I attach to my real face that obviously isn't changing and kind of, I think, have in many ways the best of both worlds for the purpose that I have, which my purpose is reaching people, helping them to understand the need for personal privacy and building and advocating for tools that help them along that road. So I think showing my face but also having a NIM helps me to kind of strike a good balance.
Yeah. Can I add something to that?
Yes, of course.
So basically, I actually would go one step even further in saying that having a name and having a mask always, when you walk around at conferences and stuff, is kind of useless. If you want privacy, just show up. Don't show up to conferences. Don't make a strong profile online. To me, that's like the antithesis. You can't be a public figure and a name at the same time. You're gonna fuck up somewhere. So if you're serious about privacy, just don't talk about it. That's it.
Would you say using a mask and speaking in public could be detrimental to Bitcoin becoming mainstream?
Yeah, I'm gonna continue on this a little bit. So I think some people really appreciate it because they see it as a different thing, and that's sometimes that's nice to see something different where you can pretty much focus on what the person say and not who the person is, as like an outsider. So as an outsider, you look at these things and you just see the name and you can focus on the content and not who they are, where they are from, and things like that. The problem kind of is that as soon as you start looking around or hanging out, you know who these people are. Nobody is really, going the full NIM. I think anyone masked at this conference, for example, I've seen their real face. I probably know their real name, and there is no effort from me to try to get there, right? It's just a natural thing to happen where human beings were hanging out. There is this trust level thing. So, yeah, I think it's more like a performance kind of thing than a real privacy kind of thing. But I'm not saying it has no impact on the public.
Yeah, I think when I think about it, I definitely understand the draw because like the crux of privacy is it's ultimately you getting to choose what you reveal about yourself to the world. So I don't think there's anything inherently wrong about someone choosing to be a NIM, show up at a conference masked, and hopefully understanding that that is going to detract from the overall anonymity that they have. It's really different than privacy, but the overall anonymity or pseudonymity that they have, because then people are going to see their features, their height, their hair color, like all of that's just going to happen. But there's also there's so much value in the in-person community that you get at events like this that it's very hard. And one of the reasons why I stopped being like a hardcore NIM that didn't let anyone know who I was or what I looked like. I didn't go to any Bitcoin meetups. I didn't go to any conferences because I was paranoid about the privacy angle. I really suffered in the relationships I could build, the conversations I could have, because I didn't have any of those in real life connections. So I understand the draw to try to strike that middle ground. I don't know, I wouldn't say that it's clownish. I would say that it's kind of it's kind of a juxtaposition because like you said, you can't really remain private when you're present in person at an event, even if you mask up when you go on stage, that sort of thing. But it at least allows you to reveal less about yourself than if you were just doing like what we are doing and going on camera with our faces revealed. So I think it's all about trade-offs, and hopefully people who are a NIM but come to things like this understand the trade-off that they're making by coming, even if they are masking up, that sort of thing.
I mean, I think the time frame around how long your identity stays masked drastically reduces once you start attending physical events,
Oh, yeah.
regardless of whether you have a mask on or some voice changing thingy or any of these kind of tools. At some point, when you interact with people, metadata leaks, even online, even just text, your time zone, the way of writing, your code. Like I remember at some point somebody posted some piece of code online, and Fiat Jeff instantly pointed to it and he's like, "Oh, this is super testnet," like, and it was just an anonymous NIM, and he's like, "Okay, yeah, you got me." It's like didn't say anything else, but that's about it.
If you had to start over with your online persona, what would you guys do different?
I think for me, just to jump in, I think I would have leaned into pseudonymity earlier. Earlier in the space, I just went by my name, and I didn't have pictures and stuff like that. But it was something that I came to late, where I didn't realize the need for privacy, and so ultimately, I know that there's stuff out there that I'm not going to be able to get back. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that it's never too late to start working on your personal privacy, but the earlier you think about it and the earlier you take steps towards it, the better off you're going to be, because there's just going to be less data out there about you. So I think just for me, like I like the balance that I think I've struck of being pseudonymous, and that I don't want to reveal my personal life to people, but being rather open with my public life, I guess you could call it, of what I do in the space of podcasting, that kind of thing. So I think I would still land at the same place, but just start here instead of starting at a place where I didn't have any desire for personal privacy, and then had to kind of learn some hard lessons along the way.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, my profiles on the forum boards are probably still not linked to me compared to my current Bitcoin lifestyle. I think that was probably my most private moments in life without even realizing. Nowadays, before even getting into Bitcoin, I had a GitHub account, I had a name there, I had a Twitter account, which I didn't really use at all. But once I got into Bitcoin, people kind of like push me, "Oh, go on X, interact with people, do it more and more and more." Eventually, you put up your name, your picture, so that people recognize you in conferences. I don't think there's a way out of it. Like, if you actually want to grow in the community and be a part of how people think and develop your code alongside other people, you have to at some point have a public identity. It will happen regardless of how hard you try. Maybe what you could do is you can have a parallel identity with some more conscious decisions on how you confront people with that. But again, I think regardless of what you do, identities get compromised all the time. You just have to be able to figure out a way to start over if you really need to.
Yeah, for the question about, how would I start? I would buy way more Bitcoin, because that's probably the biggest mistakes I've ever done. It's like basically not buying more Bitcoin, and probably if I knew, of course, number go up and things like that, I would just not be involved in the space. Because this is the best way, right? If you are an early buyer and you never show up to any of these events or whatever, and you sit on your stack, you're probably winning out there. The thing is, I'm really happy with my life right now, and I wouldn't be able to do it with a NIM. It's extremely hard to start businesses like I'm doing with a NIM. It's extremely hard to raise money, to build trust with users, even though everything I do is like open source, trustless, whatever. There is a huge amount of trust in the brand, in the people behind it, especially in this space. So in Bitcoin, if you do something like bad once, basically you destroy your reputation. That's how it works, right? And so having a good reputation attached to my real name is extremely important to me. So in terms of privacy, it's really this balance. What is my choice? If I wanted to have the perfect, even anonymity, pushing it to the beginning, it's just not being involved in the space, except just stacking sats, and that's it, which is not where I am right now. But at the same time, you need people to contribute, you need people to build stuff, and these are hardly NIMs. There are some that were NIMs that were building stuff, but as you can see, it's easy to find out who they are and getting arrested and all of that, and so, yeah.